What's up everyone? So today we're back out at the range checking out some different 5.56 loads that's affordable to shoot, yet performs really well. One of the things I've been looking at a lot lately is the AAC 77 grain open tip match. This stuff is amazing, especially for the price. Another one we're going to be looking at today too is the AAC 77 grain tip match king. To kind of compare these two, we're also going to be looking at the Winchester green tip. I know there's a lot of videos and whatnot on this, but I'm kind of doing my own tests here today. And last but not least, with it, we have the Hornady black 62 grain. These are actually a lead core. They don't have the steel penetrator, so it's kind of nice for shooting steel or shooting at indoor ranges, yet you're keeping that 62 grain projectile if that's what you're sighted in for. So today we're going to be looking at groups at 100 yards. We're going to be shooting the gel block and checking out the terminal ballistics and comparing those two between, I wanted to look at the open tip match and the tip match king to see if there's any difference between the two here at 25 yards on the Clear Ballistics gel, you know, and just kind of see how it goes, see if there's any comparison to. So if you're kind of wondering, the AAC ammunition is put on by Palmetto State Armory. It's kind of their ammunition brand. And, you know, I've been hearing a lot of good things about it from, you know, different people I shoot with and different videos and whatnot. And so I made kind of the full switch over myself. And so far it's been amazing. The consistency of this ammunition, especially for the price. Shot steel out to about 600 consistently, and that was great to see. We bought another load of this and we're going to be testing this today. And today we're going to be testing this ammunition out of my 16-inch 1-7 twist Daniel defense barrel. All right, so first up is the AAC 77 grain open tip match at 25 yards. So not too bad from that open tip match. Let's take a closer look at what happened here. So the round started to fragment here right about 2.5 inches in. We have this huge expansion here and tumbling, fragmentation. One piece of lead all the way back here at about 14.5 inches, all the way in. I did not see any parts of the bullet leave the block. Right here, we have a fragment here. We have a copper jacket here and a ton of damage right here. This stuff performs really well. See if I can get a better angle at it here. This was from an earlier miss, never mind that one. But you can see actually some fragments and stuff up here from that. But yeah, this bullet itself just got completely incinerated. There's nothing left really of any kind of mass to it other than that chunk of lead in back, and then other than that it's just fragments everywhere. Not too bad though. Hopefully you guys can see that on the video, but you can see the chunk of that jacket just kind of lodged in there at about 11.5 inches in. There's another shot from the top. All right, so next up we're going to be doing the AAC tip match king 77 grain, and we'll see how that goes. All right, so for the tip match king, this one was kind of a little bit different, honestly. So it entered in, really started to dump its energy at about 1.5 inches in, and then really unloaded it here, and it didn't travel in quite as far. Here you have this really large, broad, permanent cavity that goes a little bit further in. Here it seemed to dump it a little bit sooner and finish up sooner, and I really don't see a lot of fragments or anything like that way back in the block. The last one I see is about 11 inches in, straight in right there. Hopefully you guys can see that on the camera. And then we got a few fragments here and there, but interesting test. You know, overall they perform similar, but I think the open tip match definitely left a larger permanent cavity, and did, you know, the back end of it here, the chunk of lead did penetrate a little bit further. So maximum penetration on this second one, it's the middle one here that I can see, ends at right about 11 inches. We have that slug still sitting in there. A little bit less than the open tip match, where that one ended up at about 15 inches right here. All right, last but not least, we're going to be testing the Hornady Black 62 grain. That's, like I mentioned before, that's a lead core. So I know these gel blocks really are only meant to be shot one time, and then, you know, basically get a fresh one to get the most accurate data, but I still think we're getting some pretty good idea of what these rounds can do. The last one I want to test is the Hornady Black 62 grain and see how that one does in the gel block at 25 yards. Okay, so for the Hornady Black, it entered right here. This is the travel path through here. It started to tumble right about six or so inches in. Left a pretty decent sized cavity from here to here, from like about 6 inches all the way to the 1 foot mark. So you got about 6 inches of some decent damage. Then it must have flipped around and exited the block right about here. So with the Hornady Black 62 grain, yeah, this round definitely needs to travel a little bit more into the tissue or into the gel before it starts to tumble and do kind of what it's, you know, what it's supposed to do. As far as penetration goes, it definitely beat out the 77 grain because obviously this thing, you know, exited the block. But as far as just damage goes, I think the 77 grain open tip match is probably the winner from what I've seen. Then you have the tipped match king. They did pretty similar, but you know, I think the 77 open tip match just did a little bit more damage. And then last but not least, we got our 62 grain, much more penetration because it went out the side of the back of the block here. It kind of yawed up and still did a typical, you know, basically the kind of damage you'd expect to see like out of a green tip, right? Very similar to that as far as the overall damage goes and the bullet track path that you typically see. All right, so next up we're going to be doing 100-yard groups with all these different loads. And while we're doing that, we'll be checking the velocity of each of them using our Garmin. And we'll kind of see how that goes. But first up is the 77 grain open tip match. Okay, for the AAC 77 grain open tip match, how did we do? Our minimum was 26.19. Our average was 26.54. Our max was 26.78. And our standard deviation was 20.8. So not too bad of a group, not too bad of a spread there. So next we'll be moving on to the tip match king. It's essentially the 77 grain version of this, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so the AAC tip match king, how do we do? Our minimum was 26.60, our average was 26.68, and our max was 26.77 with a standard deviation of 5.7 feet per second. So not too bad at all. The groups, at least on this rifle, did open up a little bit. But one thing I wanted to mention too is how well this ammunition runs. It runs the rifle really well. Everything feels very consistent, which is good to see too. All right, so next up we have the Hornady Black 62 grain at 100 yards. We got the chronograph all set up, ready to go. Let's do it up. Okay, so with the Hornady Black, how do we do? Minimum is 29.44. Our average feet per second is 29.79. Our max is 29.96. And the standard deviation of 14.4 feet per second. Not too bad. Did about a 1.5 inch group. So yeah, you know, this stuff runs pretty well. It's a good option for if you want to run a 62 grain bullet, but don't want to run, green tip, running a steel penetrator basically. And speaking of, next up we're going to be doing the Winchester green tip M855 and see how that goes. All right, so with the Winchester green tip, how did we do? Our minimum was 3,040 feet per second, our average was 3,053 feet per second, and our max was 3,069 with a standard deviation of 8.8. So it's moving a little bit quicker than the Hornady Black. And you know, I know green tip gets a lot of flack, you know, and whatnot, but it's actually pretty good ammo. If you are planning on stocking up on green tip, the sort of the top of the food chain would be Winchester M855. From there would be IMI green tip. At least in the past, the lots that I've shot were pretty darn good. They're running pretty close to Winchester. And then on a little bit cheaper end would be the X-Tac green tip. Some of that stuff runs a little bit slower than the Winchester, you know, within 30, maybe 40 feet per second. But those would be kind of like my top 3 picks if you did want to stock up on green tip, you know. And, you know, it's good ammo, and sometimes you could find it at a good price. I know the terminal ballistics of it, or the terminal damage it does, isn't always that great, but, you know, it's still very consistent. It can go through a car door and do the exact same thing to a gel block as just hitting the raw gel block, right? Because of that penetrator. All right, so next up, we're gonna take the rifle out beyond 100 yards, show you guys what it'll do on steel. We're gonna be putting away the green tip, and we're gonna be putting away the Hornady Black for now, just kind of show you what these 2 rounds could do further out at longer distance, really. And that's really the main point of this, right, too. Running a 77 grain bullet, the thing stays a lot more stable at longer ranges when these 2 might start to veer or drift off or whatever. So, all right, we'll be doing that next. All right, we got this 77 grain open tip match loaded up, and we got some steel down there at 580 yards. And we're just going to bring some open tip match 77 grain hell down on that target. I'm looking for nice consistent shots once I get my hold. Not too bad, getting some good hits down there pretty easily. I'm just holding left of the target. Yeah, I'm just trying to keep that red dot as stable as possible. So up next, we're going to switch up to the tipped Match King and see how that goes. All right, we're going to load up some tipped Match King, send him down range at 580 yards. I'll be doing the same hold as before. Just left the target about the width of a target and right about at the head. There's a hit. Can tell on that one. Hit. Hit. To the left. Hit. To the left. not too bad. Yeah, she runs great in the rifle. You know, I'm kind of shooting a little bit quick, just stringing them or whatever. But yeah, it's very easy to hit a, you know, a chest-size steel. I did 580 yards with the red dot magnifier using the open tip match, or the Tip Match King. In practice and like real-world shooting, is the Tip Match King better? Could it go out further and be more stable? I'm not really sure. I'm not noticing a huge difference. Out at this range, they seem to perform about the same. I'm doing about the same hold, and I don't really, the rifle runs about the same from one round to the next. There's no difference there. Yeah, they just both run really well. So I don't think you'd go wrong, you know, with either of them. If you really wanted to test this, really, I'd probably bring it out to maybe about 700 or 800 yards, potentially with, you know, more of a powered scope, right? Like an LPVO or an actual rifle scope where you can get it out there and really test that out. I think, you know, probably right now we're at 580, or we could just call it 600 yards. I'm thinking around like that 700 yards or so, maybe 650 is when you'd potentially start to see that. Because I really, like I was saying, I really don't notice a difference as of right now. So overall, how did things fare? Basically for this rifle here, my top pick, and I think a lot of people are moving to it, would be the AAC 77 grain open tip match. This stuff is just awesome, especially for the price. You know, we do 1-inch groups with this thing, or maybe a little under if I'm doing my part. It's very consistent. It's reliable. At this point now, I probably got maybe 300 rounds of this particular ammo through the rifle, and I haven't had one single issue with it yet. And that's, you know, that was great to see. So next in line, you know, if you do want to run the Tip Match King, at least out of this rifle, the groups did open up a little bit. They still work consistent, and it's shot very well. The rifle runs very well with this ammunition, so it's very reliable. I'd recommend, if you're just kind of getting into one of these two and you just kind of want to try it out, get both, right? They're cheap enough. Try them both, group with them, maybe do the gel test kind of like I did here, and just see what you like best, right? So the Tip Match King, essentially what this is supposed to be, they claim it has better ballistics downrange, basically better wind resistant, having that tip on the end of the bullet and whatnot. We saw the terminal ballistics of that isn't quite as devastating. It doesn't do quite as much damage as the open tip match from what we saw here today. But you know, if you're just shooting paper, it might not be worth trying out and just kind of seeing how it's going. So the Hornady Black, to me, this is a nice round. It groups pretty decent and it stays really consistent. For the most part, this stuff is pretty readily available online, or, you know, at your local gun shop or whatever. I see this around quite a bit. It's a nice alternative to running green tip. If for some reason you want to stay within that 62 grain weight projectile and you want something that'll run similar to green tip, I think this is a nice option. I think I paid maybe $14 or $15 a box for these, for a box of 20. So, you know, it's not too expensive, pretty readily available, and it shoots pretty well. The terminal ballistics of it is about roughly the same as the green tip, give or take, you know, what we saw today in the gel. It does penetrate better than the 77 grain, you know, as we saw that go at the back of the block. And it goes in about 6 inches or so is where it starts to do its damage. So, and last but not least, of course, is the Winchester green tip. You know, obviously this has been around for a long time, since the 80s. It's kind of the, you know, the standard of, you know, running ammunition through these rifles, other than maybe 193. It is hot, it is loaded hot, and it does run quick, a little bit quicker than the other stuff. So, you know, it definitely can, and it definitely has really good penetration as well. That's the other thing about that. So if you're still with me, thanks for watching to the end of the video. Really appreciate it. I hope you guys got something useful out of it. But it's just definitely some cartridges I've had good luck with, and I thought I'd share them. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you at the next one.